Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Scattered Thoughts, the podcast where we talk about CPDH and other magic related things. I'm here with Bobby B. Fine, and we are back to continue our threat assessment mini series. Before we get back into part 3, though, we wanted to real quick go over. Me and Bobby were both at Riches to Rags this weekend. I don't know if it's like technically quarterly, 2-3 times a year. They do it a couple times a year tournament. Dallas Walker hosts it. It's always usually in the Philly area, and it is always a ball. So we figured we would real quick go over how we did, what we played, that kind of thing. And I think Bobby will start us off with one of the spiciest brews I have ever seen in our format, which he played to a better placing than me. So it's got to have some merit.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm clearly the better player here, as indicated by my one spot placement above you. So, but yeah, no, I brought Flesh Former to the tournament. Zero games before the tournament, lots of gold fishing, lots of last minute decision making. But it was a kind of a spicy Cycle Storm brew centered around the Hanger Scrounger and Seeker of Skybreak combo to loot through your deck. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. I could talk about it forever. I won't right now, right here. But yeah, went 2-2. Had a few decisions I made that could have changed things. I think I could have gotten another win. But you know, it happens. Very pleased with it.
It was
Gonna
that
work
last
on it.
game, right?
I think there were some
about?
in both the games. But yeah, both the games I lost, I looking back, there are decisions I could have made differently, I think. But who knows? That's the joy of decision making, right? You get stuck with it. So, but yeah, 2-2. I was okay with that result. Wish I would have top forward. But yeah, deck was sweet. Gonna keep working on it. Gonna keep playing it. It was a blast.
Yeah, no, it was a sick deck. The fact that it won any games, you were predicting 1 win, 3 losses. So
Yeah,
we'll take a 2-2.
yeah. I mean, I was predicting 0 wins, but we'll take 2.
Deck was sick as hell, and I mean, it had a combo and it won the game. You know, what could you say? I played Ghost Tormod, a classic that people don't really play that much anymore. I played it like twice in the past, and it was like 3 days before the event, and I was looking at like a couple Malcolm decks that I've been working on, and I was like, I don't feel like playing any of these and dealing with all the hate this card gets. I just want to play a control deck and do nothing, and that's exactly what I did. I had a great time. I love the deck. I think it's super fun. You know, maybe not the best deck ever made, but pretty good. I got 7th. Bobby, you got 6th, right?
Yep.
Or was it? Yeah. So we both went 2-2 and bubbled outside of the top 4 with tiebreakers, but had a good time. Deck didn't really disagree with me too hard. I mean, I probably could have played a couple things a little bit differently. In general, the rounds I lost were the rounds I lost. I don't know. I could look back on them more, but I had a good time. I played a deck that I really like. I did have a really funny round 1. In our notes, it says, unfortunately, a 1v1. Technically, it is unfortunate, right? Because I'm there to play CPDH. But realistically, for my win rate, it was fucking sick. Because I played against Sir Conrad. And let me tell you what's really bad against decks with a bunch of counterspells. Things that play one threat. So there was basically... It would have been really difficult for me to lose that round 1. That matchup was just atrocious. Poor Aaron. Really got the short end of the stick. It was unfortunate for him, but I just kind of sat down and removed everything he played and held up a counterspell the whole game. And eventually I just let Sir Conrad resolve and tutored for Oubliette and put him under Oubliette, and it was just, yeah, that was a rough one, man.
Yeah, not the types of games you want to play when you enter a tournament, but they happen.
Yeah, they're definitely rough for him, but got me an easy win in the beginning. So, you know, card games, matchups, how it goes. But Bobby had a little bit of a sick thing afterwards. He went to go meet up with the PDH pals and had them playing some CPDH. So if you want to go over that real quick.
Yeah, no, it was a good fun time. I went and spent a few days with the PDH pals after Riches to Rags. Played a lot of, pals meta PDH, which was good. Got them to play some CPDH, which was good. Lots of fun. Plane chase is a fucking trap. Don't let anyone tell you it's fun. It's a lie. But everything else we did was fun. And even that was
fun in the way Mario Party's fun.
Right.
It just gets
way to lose friendships. But yeah, no, it was a blast. Very excited to hang out with them in the future and plan some stuff with them in the future. Hopefully event wise. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, let's start talking about threat assessment and wrap up this what feels like months long conversation.
Yeah, I mean every other week, so it's been about a month and a half now. But we are finally finishing it with part 3, politics.
Yeah. So part 3 is kind of a hodgepodge, but it all makes sense. So looking back at like the 3, we have the first one is understanding what your deck is, what it does, the ins and outs, etc. Part 2 is understanding what other people are doing, what choices they're going to make when they're scary, when they're not scary, all that fun stuff. The last part is a combination of situational awareness and politics. I guess I'll start kind of going into situational awareness and what I kind of mean by this, and then I'll pass off to Joe for a little bit. But when you sit down, and this Riches Drags is a prime example. When you sit down at a table, any deck can win. You may think a deck is worse. Some decks are more powerful, yada, yada, yada. But any deck can win if you ignore them, if you don't, properly assess their threat level throughout the game. When you sit down in a pod, you can't just underestimate any deck because that's how you lose to it. I mean, I didn't end up playing against the Patchwork Automaton deck, but I'm sure almost everyone who sat down at the table thought, "Oh, I'm not that worried about that thing," and it won. So,
Yeah, I may know someone who watched 3 people die consecutively to an unblockable Patchwork Automaton, because it just people did. I don't know. No one did anything,
Yeah, it gets big and it's scary and it takes a lot of mana to do things too. So if you don't properly assess it, you lose. But yeah, so when you look at a pod, there's this phenomenon of people go in with preconceived notions. They're like, oh, I got to kill the combo player first. I'm Dargo Kiss. I got to kill Gretchen first and foremost. I don't care about anything else. That's how you lose. If you go in with this like kind of preconceived plan that you're going to stick to no matter what, that's a recipe for disaster. There are way too many variables, way too many things that happen in game to assume that whatever your pre-game plan of attack is can go off unaffected. Combo players can stumble. Control decks can stumble. People cannot mulligan. People can mulligan really low and not have a lot. You can get hit by discard. Someone can get bounced out of the game early by a Dargo, right? Like there's all these things that can happen that requires constant reassessment of what's happening and constant, hey, here's who's actually the threat. Here's how the threat shifts. One thing people even choose commanders to look less threatening or make decisions or play hands that look less threatening because it buys them some of that equity. People have called it possuming. There's all these different things, but at the end of the day, you gotta have to take all of that into account and look at the table and see, hey, here's who's the threat now. Next turn, who's the threat now? Next turn, who's the threat now? Like you should be constantly keeping tabs on what level of threat everyone is to you, how threatening you yourself appear to the table, because that's another part of it. They're going to be doing the same thing to you, and making sure you're tracking that context and using it to your advantage, communicating it, making sure everyone is on the same page.
Yeah. And I think the big thing that we've been saying this whole time, and just it bears repeating, is just context. What is going on in the game currently is what actually matters. It's not like, the overall power level of a deck, or maybe, I don't know, like the cards someone has played earlier in the game or something. Like you need to look at the table as it is right now. And there's a lot of things that go into that. I think 2 big things that you really need to think about that obviously are like not directly, like it's not maybe someone like a creature has in play, but cards in hand and like mana available to someone are 2 things that are huge. Like if someone has kind of spent the first couple turns ramping to shit and they still have a ton of cards in hand, they're pretty scary because they're really about to take some explosive turns. On the other side, even if someone kind of has a scary board state, but they have 0 cards in hand, you can assess that in the way of like, oh, well, so I kind of just have to deal with this one thing, and then they're kind of out of gas. Whereas, like, if someone has a scary board state and cards in hand, that represents a threat and other things behind it, or a way to back up that threat. So I think cards in hand is honestly just the biggest one that's like, you really have to keep that in mind. Because a lot of times there will be decks that are kind of like preconceived as scary, but they'll mull down to like 5, maybe they got really unlucky. And just from the start of the game, they are very behind, And so you have to take those things into account and think maybe, oh, I sat down and I was pretty worried about this deck because it does pretty well into mine, but, they mulled down to 5 and, they're just so far on the back foot from the start of the game. Same with missing land drops. If someone on turn 2, misses a land drop, or usually turn 3, people usually keep at least 2 lands, but if someone misses a turn 3 land drop and then a turn 4 land drop, they're not out of the game, but they are going to have a hard rest of the game. So those kinds of things should really keep you steered towards the right direction. Just thinking about things, not just necessarily what someone has on the table, but just general resources that are available to them in both cards and mana are something that I really think you should keep an eye on because they can get out of hand quickly.
There's that, and then there's also your role at a table can change. You may sit down as an aggro deck and you have a plan. I'm going to attack and I'm going to attack and that's all I'm going to do. But, that who you should attack and how you should attack can vary. There's the method of attacking all out at one player, making them use their resources on you. And then the other table, the rest of the table gets to use kind of their resources to stop them from comboing. There's obviously downsides there because you've spent all your resources on one person. You still have 2 more people to kill. But, sometimes it's depending on what's at the table, what's threatening, makes sense. Mike Flores a long time ago wrote this a long time ago. I say it like it's ancient history. It's like 25 years ago or so, give or take. Wrote this article called Who's the Beatdown? And it's about understanding your role in a 1v1 game. When you're in a multiplayer game, that dynamic shifts a crazy amount, and there's so much more that goes into it. But, you can look at Gretchen, for example. Gretchen doesn't do much at the end of the day. It ramps and it draws cards. Sometimes it plays a control role. It has to keep other people honest. Sometimes it plays the slow everyone down role, the aggro players. It plays bounce. It plays fogs. Sometimes it's just the turbo role, and it's the problem. And, part of that is dependent on draws, but a lot of it comes down to what is going on at the table. Who's scary, who's threatening, and understanding that your deck can fill a number of roles. No matter what you think you built it for, any deck can play a larger number of roles than they give themselves credit for, more than likely. So it's important to just keep tabs of that, and understand as it changes how you fit in, what's important, and what tools you have to fill that role. Plenty of cards can be used different ways. Lightning Bolt can be used aggressively. It can be used defensively. It can be used to stop a person from winning. It can be used to kill a player. It can be used to kill threat. It can be used, 1,000 different ways, right? And knowing that, hey, this card can be used all these ways and holding it until you think it's the best opportunity to use it in one of those ways is good. And part of that is patience. Part of it's, understanding the context of what's at the table. And, that ties into knowing what other people are doing and knowing what you're doing. And I think, we'll talk in a minute about politics, but communicating all of this to your table is also hugely important. I had a game in the tournament where, I had a newer player who hadn't played a lot of PDH. So there was a good chunk of the game spent explaining how other people's combos work. So everyone knew and, was on the same page as far as when it makes sense to use removal, when it makes sense to jump in, who is actually scary versus not scary, all that fun stuff. So, you look at, what it means for a person to be under control or, handled varies deck by deck. But, if a combo, let's say, a Gretchen, right? Let's say a Gretchen player got their land blown up by something. They have a few untappers. They're still scary. They just need a high tide. They just need a 1 enchantment and a freed. It's not hard for them to combo off from there. Whereas, if a Malcolm player gets the Reckless Fireweaver killed in response to a Trickery Charm, they're a lot more hindered because they need a type changer and an artifact pinger to get back to it takes them so many more cards to get back to a spot where they can win. Doesn't mean they can't have it or it's hard for them to get, but they are further away than another deck may seem. So knowing that, understanding that, communicating that are all keys to making sure everyone is aware of what's going on and who's understanding who's scary and to what extent.
Yeah, and I think a big thing of that is like the fluidity of how situations can change very quickly. Because like Malcolm may seem very scary, but the second that happens, and maybe maybe it was like he had two counter spells, he thought he could go for it, so he just used four cards to not win. He's probably at like nothing in hand. Maybe he doesn't really have any value in play, like anything that's going to repeatedly draw him cards. That kind of thing. Like, okay, so the situation at this table has completely changed. And something that you need to think about as well is like the way the situation is going to play out as the game goes on. So kind of a little bit of like foresight. So like a great example would be, say there's like a table that's like a little bit spread out, right? You've got like a gut, you've got something like a Torwaki, and then you've got generic combo deck. And the whole time the Torwaki is like, hey, we got to kill that combo deck, which I have to say, I want to say on record, I think that phrase is a red flag. At this point, I don't trust people who say that, because typically it means they're scheming, and as soon as the combo player is dealt with, their deck is in an extremely good spot. Especially if they say it from the beginning of the game. Just something to be wary of is like being overly worried about a combo deck can cause you to use a lot of resources when maybe there's another deck at the table that's trying to reserve resources, so that once they're dealt with, they can just have a complete lockdown on the game. So like the example, say there's like a gut. He builds up an army, smashes this combo player in, right? Destroys him. And then as soon as that happens, the Torwaki plays a board wipe and the game is over. He's never going to let gut resolve again. He's never going to let him get a single skeleton. And it's just kind of like nothing he can do from there. And so you just kind of have to think about that, where it's like, okay, this is the current threat, but if I deal with this threat, how is this going to affect the general dynamic at the table? Like, is there someone who's going to be so far ahead if I use this one removal spell that I'm going to be kind of screwed versus them? And then, those are really difficult situations to deal with, but those are things that you have to kind of like judge and plan out. And kind of, like I said, be careful of the kill the combo player mentality, because it can cause you to spend a lot of resources. Especially when, like I said, there's maybe a deck that's encouraging you to use your resources against it that themselves, they're probably hoarding stuff. I know TPI likes to do this a lot, where it's like, all right, everyone, let's get involved. And then everyone gets kind of spent and they're sitting there and just have a ton of great spells in hand and just slowly close out the game, because the deck's great at that, just has inevitability.
I think this all ties... we're kind of hinting at, and it's because all this stuff is tied together. This gets at the politics, right? So in my head and how I think of the politics and politicking in a multiplayer game, it's a way to weaponize threat assessment. So weaponizing your understanding of the table and who's threatening and who's scary, and also in a way weaponizing other people's inability and lack of understanding in a way that benefits you in some way, shape, or form, whether it's, for one interaction or like throughout the course of the game. Whenever someone makes a deal, I don't know how many times I've heard deals get made, and like it's so blatantly obvious that one person is making out like a bandit in a deal and the other person may not realize it. I'm very rarely, if someone is offering a deal, does it make sense, right?
Yeah, no one's just going to give up something for free. If someone's offering you a deal, you should like step back and think like, why does this guy want this so bad? Like, if it's not, like I have something aimed at my face that's literally about to remove me from the game, you should be like, clearly he's getting some good end of this, because people don't offer deals in competitive unless they're crazy good for them usually, unless there's a big misunderstanding.
Yeah, deals should really only be made to stop. Okay, this isn't necessarily true. But my stance and where I stand is I'm not making deals unless they just blatantly help me way more than anyone else, or it stops someone else from winning the game, so I still have a chance to win, right?
Yep.
Or saves me from dying, I suppose, is another way to look at it. But like there's, to understand a deal, you have to know why it's being offered, know what kind of motives could be behind it. Some people may be offering a bad deal too. You don't want to ever give them credit that they're making a good deal. But the idea is, deal making, and deal making is only a part of politics, but deal making in and of itself is going to favor one person over the other. There's never going to be a straight up fair deal. I would be hard pressed to think of an example. Maybe there is one or two here and there, but that is the exception as opposed to the norm. But the other thing that goes into it, there's always going to be hidden information. So you're never going to fully be able to analyze a deal and know what's in it as the offerer or the person taking it, right? Like it goes both ways. You know, you may be giving someone a deal like, oh, I promise I won't, mess with your stuff next turn, right? Like that's a really vague deal that I would hope no one would ever make. But that could just be enabling them to win, with one less person interacting. And, you can try to build out all these caveats and whatever to deals. But the second you start doing that, the second the deal stops being a deal and it gets into this messy, like everyone's wasting each other's time kind of politicking. Really, what I think about politics is, you should use it to, when someone's clearly not aware of what the threat is and how immediately pressing the threat is, that's when you got to push for it and you got to talk louder and you got to say, hey, this is if we let this person untap, we are going to die. If we let this game action resolve, then we are going to die. Like, you need to be pressing and, hey, like this is our moment. We got to do it now. If we don't do it now, we're more likely to hit a point of no return and a point where we can't interact.
That's so epic. This is our fucking moment. We need to take this game, and it's just like someone's about to untap with their commander.
Yeah, I mean, but like it happens, right? Like,
yeah, no, definitely, yeah.
And part of it's people don't understand like how scary a thing actually is. And things don't always look scary on their face. It's one of the cool things about some of the decks you can play is that you don't realize how scary someone truly is. Or what aspect of it is truly scary. One quick, this is less politics, but you look at Wilson Far Traveler, a deck Hive's been playing, top forward, enriches drags. That deck, everyone thinks the bear is scary. And the bear is what gets scary, but the scary part is just it's flickering a value piece every turn. And people don't play enchantment removal, so Far Traveler gets to go unfettered. And no one ever kills the derpy 1/1s or the 1/2 tutors because they're like underwhelming. But if you do that, the deck gets hampered like no other. So there's an understanding there, tying back to, understanding what other people's decks do, what's actually scary, communicating that, there's times where it may make sense to communicate that. There's times where it may not. Sometimes you're going to be in a spot where like you're always the bad guy and you look like the bad guy, and that just is what it is, There's ways to help talk your way out of it a little bit and mitigate that. But you have to be realistic about it too. Part of politics is also, realizing it is what it is, right? Like if I'm Gretchen, I have 3 untappers, I have 2 lands to tap for 4. I'm scary. I'm not going to act like I'm not. But I will point out that I can't win at instant speed and this other person is about to have their turn and they can. Or, they can do all these things, right? Like I may be scary, but there may be someone that's equally or more scary. And I think it's important not to try to be disingenuous about that because social equity, this is a social game, right? Like there's a lot of personalities, there's, feelings about people, and how you conduct yourself will carry over to future games, regardless of whether it should, regardless of whether you want it to. So my best advice is to always be, genuine with things. You can lie if you want. I don't like that, but it's not against the rules. Depending on what we're talking about. But the more you are genuine with, hey, this is scary, this is why I'm scared. Yes, I understand I'm also scary and that your thing could also be used against me, but I'm not an immediately pressing thing that is. And having those types of conversations are usually what works out better for everyone. It makes for games where, no one loses because they didn't realize what the problem is, right? Like those... and this kind of ties into like the last point I wanted to go over, and Joe, you can jump into like nobody's perfect. There's hidden information. There's never going to be a perfect game, right? And at the end of the day, someone has to win. But when I think of threat assessment and when I think of politicking, really the goal I want for every game I play in is for everyone to have made good decisions, everyone to have been well aware and well apprised of what's going on, who's scary when, and at the end of the day, like whoever wins, like one fair and square, right? Like not that, it's not necessarily fair and square otherwise, but I don't want non-games. I don't want feel bads. I don't want to lose because someone didn't realize someone was scary and they missed their opportunity to interact, right? Like those are the feel bad games. Those are the games that are frustrating for people. And, they leave kind of like a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Um, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm overreacting, but that's when I think of threat assessment in politics. Like that's like the ultimate goal. Just end up with good, solid games with good decision making.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I agree. I think that more than anything else in the format, I would much rather lose a game to someone just like high rolls and they had a stupid good hand or something. Like I lost to like a turn forward like Malcolm combo and just like, okay, whatever, you had the nuts. Then like some weird game where things got drawn out and there was some really weird politics going on that led to like, oh, I got like all this guy's stuff got removed while this guy sat over here and just played like all the best cards in his deck and nothing ever got touched, and that was a little weird. And I spent the whole game with this guy telling me I was doing everything wrong. Like, honestly, those games are the ones that I find way more frustrating and, like Bobby said, leave a bad taste in my mouth and just kind of make me like, that just wasn't great at all. I think politics, while being like part of the format and a very important tool and something you have to be careful with it because like you were saying, I think it probably leads to the worst feeling moments in the format. But also part of the reason we play the format in general is because the 4-player aspects can be fun. Those moments where everyone has to kind of like work together and, think about what's most threatening at the table. Hey, like they're trying to hint to each other what spells they have. Like, yeah, I can do this kind of thing, but I need you to do this kind of thing first. So we've got to get our pieces to work together to stop what's going on over here. So it is kind of that double-edged sword where it can be one of the most fun parts of the format. It can be just the worst part of the format. And so as much as this whole series is, also, going to help you think about it in Euro games to help you win more games and play better in those games, it should also hopefully lead to people trying to make decisions that are more like genuine and helpful to the course of the game. Also, on that note, I agree with Bobby. I think lying is crap. I don't suggest lying. I mean, like, it's not against the rules. I don't think you can get in trouble for it, but it's really not great. It's not fun for anyone. I can tell you firsthand, the second anyone has said anything close to a lie to me, I never trust them ever again. And anything they say, I barely listen to it because it's what you have to do. Like, if someone tells you that they don't have like, oh, I'm not going to win next turn, and then they win next turn instantly on a card they clearly didn't top deck, and it's like, okay, so you'll just say whatever, so I can't listen to anything you say. You'll say whatever it takes,
Yeah, and I get, to the one end, I get it. If that's what you're going to do, that's what you're going to do. But no, it comes at a cost. I said it before, I'll say it again. Magic is a social game. You're playing with a lot of the same people over and over again more often than not. And you don't want to throw away that social equity to get one win more often than not. In my opinion, if you do, you do you. But there's value to, being honest and genuine. And there's also something to be said about word choice, right? Like you can very particularly word things, right? I can think of a game recently where, I was told I wouldn't be attacked next turn, but I still died to some other thing, right? I got like corrupted or something, right? I like died to something else. And, I was like, well, that's on me. I could have made a better deal or should have used better words. And so, there's so many better alternatives to lying in those kind of political situations that, mastering word choice and that kind of stuff are good. Not for me. People are going to do it. It's inevitable, whatever. But yeah, I think the overall goal and the overall just behind this, in general is wanting better games. Like I want games that are good. I want to feel good after a game. I like hard fought games, even if I don't win. If I feel like, oh, there's a lot of interaction, there are a lot of really good decisions, it felt close. Those games are awesome. Like I just like feeling like everyone did their thing or tried to do their thing. Everyone, did their part to try to stop it. And at the end of the day, the deck that won based on, whatever. And that's awesome, right? Like, you and I, we've been playing CEDH a little bit more, and we played a game over the weekend where, there are fights over one Grand Abolisher, and then the second Grand Abolisher came down, and, the game ended. But, everyone was trying to do their part to stop, minimize the problems and counter and destroy things. And that game...
That was also a game where Aaron didn't quite understand Wishclaw Talisman.
Yeah, we won't
gave
get
Wishclaw Talisman to a guy with a Grand Abolisher, which was pretty funny.
Yeah, we won't get into all that. That game wasn't the best, but it was an example of hey, here, everyone, like once the problem is identified, even if it may be after decisions are made, steps were taken to minimize that risk. The problem.
It was a ball. I had a fun time with it. It was a ball.
Yeah. So good to, threat assessment, knowing who's problem when, knowing who's scary. It's not easy. It takes a lot. It takes work. It takes research. It takes playing and takes reps. It's never going to be, no one's ever going to be perfect at it. But all you can do is, continue to work at it, continue to try it, test things out, try strategies, employ different things, see how they work out. Everyone's going to have their different styles. Everyone's going to know what works best for them, what doesn't work best for them. And I think overall it'll lead to more fun games, better games, closer games, and fewer feel-bads. Even if you don't win, you can minimize the chances of a game feeling bad, which I think is really important.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, there are games, the whole thing is decided by politics, and it doesn't feel great all the time. Like, I know over the weekend, the game that I had against Patchwork, it was like it was like an Abdel Black, so there was a lot of discard going on, and our buddy Chum was on a 0-card hand, had Gretchen in play and nothing else, not even a land aura, and got killed by the Patchwork, basically down to politics, which is like, you could go into a million like pipelines of how that could have been scary or not scary or whatever. But at the end of the day, there were other players with cards in hand and permanents in field that did obviously Gretchen's very strong, but like Gretchen had 3 mana available or something. You just couldn't even activate. And so we're just trying to think about games that, I don't know. It didn't feel great for Chum. I just know, and that's an example that's right in my head because it just happened where it's like, yeah, politics can lead to games that feel pretty bad where it felt like, wow, there were certainly decisions made that feel like, I don't know, that they maybe could have been thought through a little bit more or had some more factors taken into account or all those things. Because, yeah, like Bobby said, at the end of the day, we just want good games. We want hard-fought games that are fun. Obviously, we want to win them. It's competitive. But maybe more important than that is, just a game that plays its course and doesn't feel like there's, because, I don't know, a lot of times politics, if they get too messy and, something happens, they can feel kind of weird and bad because it's decision-making that is heavily influenced by other people. And that can really start to, get with your mind and be a little tilting, to be honest. But when it's good, it feels really great. And you all came together and, did something for the good of the game and, progressed it in a way that felt very genuine.
Right. Exactly. So, but yeah, that kind of sums up everything I had to say on threat assessment. I know it's been, 3 hours of talking at this point. So I'm sure I'll have more to say. I'm sure people have comments and, want to argue. And if they do, great. I welcome that. But, at the end of the day, everyone's going to have their own opinions and definitions for all this stuff. So curious, if you feel differently, if you feel strongly, let us know. Message in the sanctuary, comment, whatever, all that stuff. I think this is just good to talk about this stuff. It's a hot button topic that people like to talk about, but no one ever really spells out what it means. And I think part of it is because of how messy it is. We've talked for 3 hours about what it is, and I'm sure we could talk a lot longer if we really wanted to. Yep. There's just a lot that goes into it, and it's never going to be easy. It's never going to be straightforward, but it's always something everyone should be talking about and working on. So curious how other people feel, what they do, how they define it, if they think we're wrong, if they think, oh yeah, this is great, let us know either way. But yeah, one other, we spent a little bit talking about Riches to Rags, which was an awesome tournament experience. We also have a few more tournaments coming up. Joe, why don't you tell us about Common Cause?
Yeah, so we got Common Cause coming up. That is OMG Chris's tournament. Going to be $16 entry on the 27th of January, February, March, April. 27th of April. So please enter that. Join it. Me and Bobby, or at least I know I am. Bobby's thinking about it, going to enter with some spicier decks because we're both taking a little bit of a slowdown for playing because, oh my God, the past 6 months we've been playing so much with all the tournaments and stuff. So at least I personally, I'm going to bring something a little more still good. Well, maybe still fun and can win games. We'll have a win condition within the deck and have a good time at that. And then after that is going to be Sanctuary 5 on January, February, March, April, May 18th. Also $16 entry. They're basically the same exact rule sets. So yeah, feel free to come out to both. Going to be some great competition. We've been seeing some really cool decks lately. Mid-range, honestly, been doing pretty well. We'll see if that keeps going. How people react to that kind of thing. Honestly, that's the coolest part of tournaments to me, partially, is just seeing what people decide to bring. So yeah, please come out and play. I will be likely playing in both of them unless something happens. I don't know. Bobby can't play in his own event, but is hopefully playing in Chris's.
Yeah, I'm planning on. I think I should be good for Common Cause. I'm waiting on one thing to know whether or not I'm officially good to go before I register. But yeah, to register for that, go to omgmtg.com. $16 to enter.
Put the link in the guy below.
Yeah, link
Not
will be in the
actually a link,
description. And then sanctuarypdh.com has the link. Discord has the link. But yeah, we'll post all those links in the description so you can click it, sign up, and join us for all the fun.
Yep, can't actually click it because neither of us will submit our phone number. We're too lazy, but
follow the link, whatever.
Follow the link.
Go where it
Copy
says
and
to
paste
go.
it. Yep. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for listening. Like Bobby said, if you have any thoughts, feel free to leave them in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, sign up to our Patreon. We got an OnlyFans now. You could register the event twice to give us a little extra money.
Don't listen. None of that was true. All of that was a lie. Just
the OnlyFans isn't a lie. We're getting on it. We're working on it
soon.
soon.
For all the spiciest brews and deck picks. So,
dude, I tell you, the only place on the internet that cycle storm could exist is OnlyFans, because that shit was definitely sensual, bro.
It was a hot ticket, that's for sure. And we didn't even bring out the part where it only came together because you and I spent like 2 hours digging through boxes of comments at a shop in downtown Philly.
That shop, it was me and Bobby were looking, and there's some part of Bobby that wants to win the event, right? So he's kind of hoping not to find stuff, and we find like all the cards he needs pretty much, and then he finds a foil flesh former, and it's like, Bobby, you gotta play the deck. Like, you gotta play the deck.
It was a sign, and unfortunately there were some cards that were only foils, but every time I was like, man, if I don't have this card, I can't play the deck. It was like the next card we found. I was like, well, okay, I still can't really play the deck because I don't have this card, and then we found it, and it was just like, all right, well, the deck wants me to play it clearly, so.
When I found the pile of like 15 fuming effigies, and every single one was a foil that looked like a fresh Pringle.
Yeah, it was not the ideal find for some of these cards, but that's okay. Yeah. We found them, so it was a good fun time. I'm gonna keep working on it. I'm sure we will talk about it in the future if I play it some more, or maybe you can come see it in action in one of these tournaments. Who knows?
It was a bowl. All these events keep being fun, so come and join us. But I think that's all we got for today. So thank you all for listening, and have a good one as always.
See ya.